Hi folks, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the T28 Heavy Tank concept, the Tier 7 American TD reward tank, that's what it is. This tank is currently available for completing the second tier of personal missions, or it's also available occasionally on Xbox as a standard premium tank, although on PC, as I say, it's a reward tank. But the question we're going to be asking today is this tank worth maybe completing the personal missions if you haven't already unlocked it? Well, we're going to start with the history, as per usual, and this is easy because, as its name suggests, the T28 Heavy Tank concept is a concept tank developed in 1943 when the Americans were facing the possibility of maybe having to invade mainland Europe and having to overcome extremely tough defenses, like maybe the Siegfried Line. They felt they needed a bunker buster or a heavily armored assault tank, and they eventually built the T28, which then became the T95, and then it became the T28 again. There's a whole story about that, and I covered it in the T28 Ace Tanker video on the channel quite a while ago now, but the history is there if you want to search for it. But this was America's heaviest ever tank, weighing in at about 100 tons. Now, this tank is one of the original proposals for the T28 concept, and it was based on the M6 Heavy Tank. And the M6 Heavy Tank was basically a T1 Heavy. It was a T1 Heavy variant. So while no information is actually known about the T28 Heavy Tank concept, we can speculate that basically because it was going to be based on the M6, which in turn was a variant of the T1 Heavy, it was probably going to have a, a Wright G209 cylinder gasoline engine that generated 825 horsepower. So, the engine was okay, but in-game we actually get a 960 horsepower engine. So, not exactly historically accurate, but then again, this tank never really existed. We also know that the original T28 was supposed to come with the 100mm T5 gun, but in-game it comes with a 105mm T5 gun. So, again, maybe a little bit of flexibility on Wargaming's part here. So, we can speculate, but it's all speculation, because really all that's known about this tank is what it looked like, because this tank actually was a wooden mock-up. Not a lot is known about this concept tank other than the fact the wooden model still exists. It was a wooden model that Wargaming purchased from eBay, and they based the tank we have in game on it. So basically, yeah, it did, potentially exist, but no plans, no specifications, no nothing exists. So the armor thickness, engine power, gun handling, stats, everything else, they're all pretty much made up by Wargaming. But still, it was potentially going to be the T28, and I suppose it's nice to have it in game regardless. So as per usual, I'm going to be comparing the T28 Heavy Tank concept against all the other premium Tier 7 TDs in the game. So we're going to pop into Tanks GG. So this is the part where the side-by-side comparison should be easy, but it's not, because we're talking about the T28 Heavy Tank concept here, and this is the third time I'm trying to record this flaming thing, because this is a tank that really you can't compare to anything else up here. These are all the Tier 7 premium TDs, and unfortunately, none of them are anywhere near or similar to the type of tank that the T28 Heavy Tank concept is, with the exception of the AT-15A. And the problem with the AT-15A, even though it's slow, sluggish, and well armored, just like the T28 Heavy Tank concept, is that it gets special matchmaking. So the stats for the AT-15A need to be taken with special matchmaking into consideration. And it's very, very hard to compare it against the other TDs, because in my opinion, it's not a TD, it's a heavy tank, it's a heavy tank concept. So just very quickly, just going down through here, the DPM is not good. It's got the second worst DPM of all the tanks up here, with the exception of the Scorpion, which is only slightly worse. The penetration can be completely discounted because the penetration again is not good. Even though it looks okay according to the stats up here, the AT-15A and the E25 are worse, and they get special matchmaking. So really you can only compare it against the Scorpion, the Steyr, and the two Russian tanks, and the two Russian tanks are worse, and the Scorpion and Steyr are better. So the penetration is definitely not good. 181 difference to 203 is a huge, huge difference, whereas a difference of 175 to 181 isn't that big. So it's got slightly more penetration than the SU-122-44 or the 122S, but it's nowhere near near as good as the Scorpion or the Steyr, so the penetration is not good on the tank. It's the only tank up here that comes with a 105mm gun, so we can't really compare alpha either. Most of the other guns are smaller caliber and therefore have less alpha, or higher caliber and have more alpha. So you know, again, 320 is standard for the 105mm, at least the same gun on similar tanks or other tanks with the same gun. So incredibly hard to compare, but what you do see is you've got the worst rate of fire and the worst reload, so that results in poor DPM. And then we come down to the shell velocity, and it's not good. It is slightly better than the 122s, but it's not good. 872 means you're going to be firing at distance, at moving targets. It's going to be harder to hit them. You've got to lead the target. So shell velocity definitely is not good. It's on the low side, but it is better than the Russian guns by a significant margin. This is one important thing that really sets the heavy tank concept apart from the other TDs, is the ammo capacity. Doesn't look amazing here compared to the ammo on the other tanks, but when you compare 60 rounds with 320 alpha damage and a potential damage of 19,200, that is hugely better than any of the other TDs up here. This is heavy tank potential damage, as I'll show you in a moment. The gun handling, once again, you can't really compare it because every single tank up here is using a different gun. No similar guns up here, but you can see that the aim time is, you know, again, better than the Russians, but worse than pretty much everyone else. The accuracy is 0.4, although it shows 0.38 here, so again, accuracy is not very good. It's Russian accuracy, except it's not a Russian tank, so it's not quite Russian accuracy. It is technically slightly better, but once again, slow shell velocity, low pen, and, you know, the accuracy isn't very good. So you're going to be missing shots, you're going to be bouncing shots. It's not looking good for the gun handling. Now, the soft stats for the gun handling are okay. You can see that it's better than the AT-15A or the Scorpion regarding when you're shooting on the move or while you're turning your tank, but it's worse. It's even worse than the Russian or the 122S. It's the same as the SU-1224, and it's significantly worse than the E-25. So, but again, it's incredibly hard to compare these tanks. But what I will say is it's not terrible. Shooting on the move in this tank is actually quite good, probably because the tank is so slow. Now, the gun depression is a disappointing 4 degrees, which matches the 122-44. So yeah, every other tank has it beaten up here with the exception of that one. So yeah, it's the gun handling is it's I don't know, it's very hard to compare it to any of the tanks up here. It's very similar gun handling to the Russian guns, but it's got better aim time and slightly better accuracy. That's pretty much it, which means it's not really a sniper. That's basically what you get from these stats. It's not really a sniper. When it comes to mobility, then it's not very good. It's got a 29 km/h top speed, which only beats the AT-15A. It's got a 10 km/h reverse speed, which is terrible. It's got the worst reverse speed of any of the tanks up here. The engine power and the power to weight ratio is okay, but once again, it only beats a couple of the tanks. Most of the other tanks have the power to weight ratio beaten. And then for some unknown reason, the T28 heavy tank concept gets the absolute worst ground resistance. It is absolutely awful ground resistance on hard, soft, and medium ground. It is terrible. You can see that just accelerating, it's going to be worse in this tank, even though it's not terrible at accelerating. It can reach its top speed because it does have a decent power to weight ratio, but it's just got bad ground resistance for some reason, worse than any of the tanks up here. The ground resistance while turning the tank, now you're probably not going to notice the ground resistance while accelerating, but you're definitely going to notice it while turning the tank because it's awful. Absolutely awful. I mean, 18.77 is everything with the exception of the Scorpion during turret traverse, which is a slow turret traverse, but everything here is worse. Tank traverse while turning your tank is hugely worse than any of the other tanks up here. Most of them are 60% better, or at least 50%, 60% better terrain resistance while turning your tank on effective or on hard, medium, and soft ground. So the terrain resistance is awful. Trying to turn this tank is awful, and yeah, you can compare that particular stat. Another weird stat for the tank is its armor, which again is only comparable to the AT-15A. It's the only tank that's close up here, and it gets worse armor pretty much all round than the AT-15A. It gets 203 on front, 101 on the sides, 50 on the rear, and it's still worse than the AT-15A, but it's significantly better than all the others. So once again, incredibly hard to compare this tank, and about the only place where this tank really shines is its view range. So it does have much more potential damage, and it's got much more view range. You've got 370 meters of view range, which is exceptionally good. There are very few Tier 7 TDs in the game with 370 meters of view range. I think it's not the Dicker Max, it's the Sturme Immel has a very similar view range at 370, so the view range is very good. So you're probably not getting a lot out of this. So essentially what we've got is a heavily armored, sluggish, but it turns badly, but it can accelerate quite well because the power to weight ratio isn't terrible, and the gun handling is average at best. It's very hard to compare it as a TD, but bear with me for a moment, because we're going to go to another screen here and we're going to take a look at it and treat it like a heavy tank, because now all of a sudden the stats are looking a lot more average. They're not extreme. What we've got is DPM that's better as a heavy tank than most of the other heavily armored, slow Tier 7 heavies. I've got all the slow, heavily armored Tier 7 heavies up here, and the DPM is better than all of the tanks up here. Not by much, but it's better. The penetration, once again, none of these tanks see special matchmaking. You see the penetration is just average. It's the same gun as the T29, but the T29 got a buff, so unfortunately the T29 has better penetration, but the penetration is average. It beats the KB3, it beats the Black Prince, but it's worse than the other three. The damage is much more comparable as well, because we've got 105mm guns up here, 320 compared to 330 on the Oni's 105mm, 320 on the T29. So you can see that the damage is more comparable with a heavy tank than any of the TDs I was comparing it against. And you can see that the rate of fire, again, instead of being the worst rate of fire and the worst reload of any of the TDs, all of a sudden it's average rate of fire and average reload for a Tier 7 heavy. So this is, so far the firepower is looking like a heavy tank as opposed to a TD. The shell velocity, again, whereas it's got pretty poor shell velocity with the exception of the Russian TDs, again, it's not great. It's on the low side, and when we put it into context against all the heavy tanks, unfortunately it's got about the worst shell velocity with the exception of the KV3. So shell velocity is not good when you treat it as a heavy tank as opposed to a TD. And then the other big thing here, as I say, is the ammo capacity and the potential damage, and all of a sudden you can see that the potential damage is much more in line with a heavy tank than it is with a TD. So as I say, I think this is a heavy tank. It's not a TD, it just happens to be missing a turret. When it comes to gun handling, once again, instead of having the best gun handling or the worst gun handling, you can see it's got gun handling that's pretty average. I mean, it's better gun handling than most of the Tier 7 heavies up here, but it's not quite as good as the Black Prince or the Tiger P. So again, gun handling much more in line with a heavy tank than a TD. The gun depression is still awful, even as a heavy tank. And then we come to mobility, and once again, we're seeing a pattern here. The forward speed, average for a heavy, better than some, worse than others. The reverse speed, awful, but it matches some of the other heavy tanks. So the mobility seems to match the heavy tanks much closer. The power to weight ratio, again, it's got good power to weight ratio for a heavy tank, and it beats all the other slow, heavily armored heavy tanks up here. So it didn't do that as a TD, but it does it as a heavy tank. And then the terrain resistance, which is hugely worse than any of the other TDs, is better. Once again, it's better than the heavy tanks in most ways, but you can see that the traversing the tank, where the TDs were about 60% better, it's much more in line with a heavy tank. You can see that most of the other heavy tanks are similar or just slightly better. So it basically has heavy tank mobility. The armor, once again, closer to heavy tanks, because you've got 203mm on front, you've got 200 on the front of the Tiger P, 152 on the front of the Black Prince. The turret armor, even though it doesn't have a turret, it does have a gun casement. That is 203.2 as well, which compares well with 200 on the Oni and 240 on the Black Prince. So the armor is much more comparable to a heavy tank than it is to a TD. The view range, Also comparable, it's got average view range for a heavy tank, even though its view range is very good for a TD. So 370, some of the others have 380, some of the others have 370, and the KV3 has got terrible view range at 340. So the view range is more heavy tank standard than it is TD. So the only place the T28 heavy tank concept falls down as a heavy tank as opposed to a TD is unfortunately its health. You can see that the health comes in at 880 here compared to significantly more health, almost double more health in the case of the Oni. So that is about the only place. It has armor, it handles like a heavy tank, the gun handles like a heavy tank, the view range is like a heavy tank, but unfortunately the health is still down around the TD. It is good health for a tier 7 premium TD, but it's terrible health for a tier 7 heavy. And that starts with the armor, because the armor is a very, very impressive 203 millimeters on this flat plate here. Now, that's not going to be effective against higher tier tanks. Lots of higher tier tanks are going to have no problems penning this, or most higher tier tanks don't even bother trying to pen this. As soon as they see a T28 heavy tank concept on the battlefield, they just switch to premium.
We didn't penetrate their armor. They killed our driver. We're immobilized. We're done for. Everyone get out.
Yep, so no need to worry about weak points or anything when you can just hit that 2 key. But regardless, even though the armor is not very effective against higher tier tanks, it is extremely effective against similar tier or lower tier tanks. But you know, if they do switch to premium, there's a chance they can pen you, but the armor is effective even if it's flat. You can see 203 millimeters of penetration on the upper glacis here. Lower glacis not quite as well, but it's very not as quite as well armored, but it's very, very well angled, so that's going to be a bounce. And the gun mantlet, once again, 203 millimeters. So if you hit the gun mantlet, there is no armor behind it, but again, you've got to go through 203 millimeters of armor. And if you hit to the either side of the gun, it's going to be up to about 250 millimeters of effective armor. So, yeah, the armor on this tank can be incredibly well. You've got two side cheeks here that are well angled, and these are like 364 millimeters to go through. You're not going to be going through this. There's no body behind the tracks, so hitting the tracks is not going to do anything other than damaging the tracks. You're not going to damage the tank, but, you know, we'll get to the elephant in the room, which is these two big, I don't know, I heard someone refer to them as side boobs. We've got these two side booms, which technically I suppose they're called sponsons, but these sponsons are definitely weak spots. They look like weak spots, and they are. You've only got about 100 millimeters of effective armor if you hit them directly from the front, but you can hit them at a bad angle, and maybe they might bounce something against lower tier tanks, but don't count on it. So you want to keep these hidden at all times. And how do you keep these hidden? Well, you use the amazing traverse on the tank, but we'll get to that in a moment. So the armor seems to be quite effective, especially against lower tiers, but one of the things that does surprise me is you've got three very, very big weak spots up here. I'm amazed at how often I'm driving this tank, and you know, people are trying to pen me frontally, or they're trying to pen me as I'm angling the tank, and they just neglect. I might be able to hide my sponsons here left and right, but they completely ignore my viewports. You've got three viewports on top of the tank that are incredibly weak. You know, even tanks firing HE should be able to pen these things. So you got 70 millimeters of effective armor, up to about 75 millimeters of effective armor on the viewports. This is where you want to shoot it. If you've got an experienced T28 heavy tank concept driver who's side scraping, hiding his sponsons, just shoot him in the roof, because he can't hide these these viewports. You can shoot them at either side, no matter which way he's angling, and you're going to pen and you're going to damage him. So that's the best way to take one of these things out from the front if you can't get shots on the sponsons. So anyway, yeah, as I say, you're going to keep these things hidden. So these weak spots, these are what most people try to aim at, and if they can't hit these, sometimes they give up, or sometimes they'll hit the 2 key, but there's nothing you can do about that. But the gun traverse on this is 30 degrees to either side, so that is pretty impressive. So really the best way to play this tank is to find a rock, or to plant a city, hug a building, and basically if the building is here, to this side, what you can do is you can hide your sponson. You can they can't see the sponson on the other side because there's a wall right here, and then you can turn your gun all the way around a corner and you can shoot them. So this sponson is hidden by a wall. and the sponson on the other side is hidden by the angle of your tank, and you just turn your 30 degrees and come around a corner and shoot them. And at this angle, you can see that the effective armor is up from 203 to 219. So, yeah, the armor. This thing is for trolling lower tier tanks. That's what it's for. The side armor, when it's angling, don't even try, because you can see that the effective armor is up to 260. Even though it's angled and maybe giving you a side shot into this what looks like flat armor to the side, don't bother. It's 100 millimeters of effective armor, but angled at all, it gets up to 265. And the side tracks, look at this, you've got 20 millimeters of spaced armor, that's what the tracks are, but you've also got spaced armor covering the tracks, so you got 50 millimeters of spaced armor over the tracks. Then you've got to go through 20 millimeters of track armor, which counts as spaced armor, before getting to the 100 millimeters of side armor. So you can see you need 506 millimeters of penetration to be able to pen this tank through its tracks. Don't even try. Now the downside is the traverse speed is absolutely awful, and if people do get to your side and rear, then you've only got about 103 millimeters of effective armor. As I say, don't bother with the tracks, because you can see that the armor is much more effective. You've got lots of spaced armor you got to go through, so you know, even though it says 152 will go through this, there's a very good chance that your shot might be absorbed by the tracks or the spaced armor. Get to the side, shoot it in the side or rear. The rear armor, again, absolutely garbage, 50 millimeters on the back, and the roof is only 33 effective at this angle, but it's only 25 millimeters thick if you're arty. So arty can hurt these things very effectively, or tanks getting to your side and rear. Very easy to take a T28 heavy tank concept out. You've got his traverse beaten. His traverse is absolutely awful, as you saw on the stats, so you can get to the side, you can get to the rear, and you can basically take them out very easily. What you don't want to do is you don't want to sit in front of this tank and trade shots, because it's got decent alpha damage, it can angle very well, and you will have problems penning it if you don't shoot his viewports or know to shoot his viewports. So yeah, it's a very effective, you know, armor. I think the armor can be negated by firing premium ammunition, but there's nothing we could do about that. So let's check out this engine and this, I suppose, gun, although we're not going to be doing much sniping here, but let's check out this armor, I suppose. This is the reason I picked out this replay. Let's check out this armor. And as you can see, we are here on Ensk, which is a very small map, city map, almost, with the exception of the zero line. But I'm going to advance. I'm not sitting at the back. I'm top tier and very fortunate matchmaking. I'm a tier 7 in basically a tier 7 game, but only 3 tier 7s on either side, and everyone else is tier 6 or tier 5. And you can see I'm advancing and I'm always at an angle. I very rarely advance straight on, but way, there we go. Bounce on the side from a T67. Here's the first bounce, but we're checking out the armor. KV1, okay, ELC. We're going to advance. We're going to try and stay angled. Gonna hide our sponsons. Oh, thought I was gonna get a shot through the fence there. Couldn't get an outline because of the fence, so we're gonna try and stay angled. Shoot his weak spot. And I'm being pushed from behind. Now, I'd love to stay angled more, but that Tiger P basically pushed me out, so we're going to advance. Shot through the wall. 317, so 320 alpha damage on this gun. We leave him on 3 health, so I get incredibly unlucky in this game. I leave a lot of tanks on low health. 330, yeah, once again, leave him on 4 health. Yeah, very unlucky here. Oh, Leopard, look at the rate of fire, look at the gun traverse, boom, we can take him out. So we're staying angled. Yeah, he bounces on my sponson. And I thought maybe we could round kill him, but we've got the reload. We just advanced. You know, we don't care. And this is what this dream scenario is. Now, stats show shooting on the move is okay, so shot before being fully aimed. And yeah, staying at a slight angle even though I don't need to. And he bounces, and yeah, once again, I don't manage to pick up the kill. I'm incredibly unlucky here, not picking up kills, leaving tanks on low health. Missing my shots, but the enemy team are capping, and we just come driving around the corner, shot in the move, and this tank is very good at shooting on the move. Showed the stats in the garage. Now watch this. Okay, so we've didn't miss out on that kill, but we're shooting the T34, and somehow managed to kill a Stranitzwagen M42 who was completely blind. He wasn't on the minimap. He was sitting in a bush, completely stealth. We managed to kill him completely blind by shooting another tank. Ah, yes. So T3485, Look at this reload, staying angled, boom, that's 4 kills, and the game is almost over, just a T29 left. So yeah, this is the heavy tank concept. You just advance, you hit W when you're top tier, and you just advance. You stay angled, try and hide your sponsons, but tier 5s, tier 6s are going to have major problems dealing with this tank when it's driving straight toward them. So are we going to get any more damage? T29, 181 millimeters of penetration. We put one into the hull of the T29, he dies, and there we go. Very, very quick 2.5k damage and 4 kills. So as you can see, I call this replay T28 concept bully, because that's exactly how I feel about this tank. When you're top tier, you are a bully. You don't sit at the back just because this tank has a TD symbol above it. What you do is you bully. You go in, you kill their tier 6s, you kill their tier 5s, your armor is incredibly effective even as a tier 7 against other tier 7s. Stay angled, shoot on the move, just keep driving forward and kill everything. The only thing you got to worry about is whether or not you've got backup and whether or not enemy tanks can get to your side and rear. But as long as you've got backup, as long as you've got tanks behind you, the enemy tanks can't advance. You just advance and you're unstoppable. You are virtually unstoppable. This thing is wonderful when it is top tier. But, cool-headed, high caliber, and this is how you play the tank. Now, I want to show you this. This isn't important. It was only a first class 1164, but this is what's important because the armor gets criticized on this tank because there are so many weak spots. The armor gets criticized because when you're against higher tiers, players just spam gold. That's true, but they'll do it against any tank in the game. You know, probably more often against this one than others, but when you get top tier, even tanks firing gold can bounce, even your sponsons can bounce, and we received 19 hits and we managed to bounce 18. In fact, the one penetration we did take was HE from KV1 firing a derp gun, so 13 shots fired at close range. Forget the accuracy, forget the shell velocity, it doesn't matter. At close range, when you're shooting people in the face, 13 shots, 10 hits, 10 pens. So, and the only ones I missed in there are shots I can blame myself for, or shots I was just a fraction too late, shot was in the air, enemy tank died. So we spotted 1, damaged 9, destroyed 4, did 13, 25 assistance damage, and 17 base cap points. But you can see that we don't really make a lot of money in this tank, so even though it was an okay game, 46,000 credits earned is not okay. It's pretty average, 31 after costs, and we fired 13 shots and our ammo came to 13,000. So if you're missing shots, it's costing you 1,000 credits every single time. So yeah, it's a bully, and this is where you want to be in a T28 concept. If you get onto a city map and you're top tier, you are a heavy tank, you are a bully, and that's one of the reasons I really like the T28 concept. So there you have it, the T28 heavy tank concept. When you're top tier, this tank is a complete and utter bully. Hope for a decent map, play it like a heavy tank, be aggressive, advance up the front, and just tear enemy tanks apart. The reason it's a heavy tank in my mind is it's a much better heavy tank than it is a TD. As a TD, you've got to contend with this gun. And the problem with this gun is the rate of fire may be okay, the DPM may be okay, but the penetration is not great for a tier 7 TD, especially if you're facing tier 8s and tier 9s, and you're going to drop off penetration over distance. So TDs tend to be played more passively, they sit further back on the red line, or at least I should say that's what they tend to do, even though they shouldn't. But basically, yeah, the penetration is going to drop off over distance. You don't have good penetration to begin with, so even if you're hitting your target, there's a very good chance you're going to be bouncing on them. But that's the key point. If you're hitting your target playing this as a TD, because not only do you have to contend with poor penetration that drops off over distance and will bounce, you've got to deal with poor shell velocity. It takes a while for the shell to reach the target, so if you're shooting moving targets, it can be hard to hit them. And then you've got to deal with very poor accuracy. So the aim time, not terrible for the rate of fire, but the accuracy is 0.4. This is a TD. You're not going to be sniping with this gun very effectively. So if you can actually hit the target, you've then got to deal with the penetration. So it's not a very good sniper, and for a TD, not being a very good sniper is a very bad thing. But the other negative, or the other bad thing about this tank is you really don't want to be bouncing shots, because this is a reward tank. It is not a premium tank, so you don't get a premium credit modifier. You don't get extra credits for playing this tank. It's a reward tank, and the ammo is not cheap. Look at this. The standard ammo, 181 millimeters of penetration, standard AP. You're paying 1,000 credits a shot. Okay, so that's not cheap for a tier 7. You know, and if you're bouncing shots or missing shots because of that poor accuracy, poor shell velocity, or poor penetration, that's costing you 1,000 credits a shot. That's not good. The premium ammunition, is not very good. You know, while the penetration is okay at 224, and you'll be able to pen a lot more tanks with the premium ammunition than the regular ammunition, you're paying 4,800 credits. Now, this is a gun that only does 320 alpha. Now, when you compare that to guns that are on the 122mm or 122mm shells that are maybe on Chinese or Russian tanks, you know, you're paying 4,800 credits for premium ammunition on those guns as well, but they get 390 alpha damage. So they do more damage for the same price for the premium round than you do with the heavy tank concept. So it's costing you more to fire premium ammunition in this, and you make less credits back as a result because your alpha damage isn't as high. And then you've still got this poor shell velocity and poor accuracy to deal with. So there's a very good chance if you're spending a lot of credits on premium rounds, you're going to miss the target anyway. So yeah, I don't recommend maybe spamming a lot of gold in this unless you absolutely have to, even though I've got quite a lot up here. I tend not to use it very much, but it's not a premium tank. You don't get the premium credit modifier, and you know, if you're sitting at the back of the map and playing this thing passively, shooting at tanks across the map, you're going to miss a lot of shots, and those shots you miss are going to cost you a lot of credits, which is just one other reason why I don't think it should be played as a TD unless there's no choice. Maybe you got onto a big open map, it's going to take you forever to get into position, then you can play it as a TD. It's just not a very good TD. But if you're in a position where you can advance with your heavy tanks, or even if you've got no heavy tanks on your team, just play as a heavy tank, go into the usual heavy tank positions. I think it can be very, very effective. So anyway, let's move on to equipments. We have a lot of equipment choices, but not very much is viable. So you got improved vents, which I do have on the tank. It makes it about 2.5% better all round. So that helps me if I'm playing it aggressively. It helps me if I'm playing it passively. Wet ammo rack, complete waste of time. Toolbox, only if you've got a terrible crew. If you've got a very bad crew in this tank, then maybe a toolbox is going to help you at least till you get a repair skill. As you can see, I'm working on a repair skill. This is my T28 crew in here, so you know, at least till you get a crew with a decent repair skill, then maybe a toolbox is viable if you've got a brand new crew in here. But otherwise, I think they're a better piece of equipment. Once again, gun rammer. If you can put a gun rammer on most tanks in the game, do, because 10% extra or minus 10% to loading time equals 10% to DPM, 10% more DPM. Very, very good. So you're going to have a gun rammer on this tank. Heavy spall liner is a possibility. I mean, if you play this more passively, and you shouldn't, but if you do play it more passively and you find yourself getting spotted because the camo rating isn't very good and arty is focusing you, then maybe a heavy spall liner is okay if you're sitting at the back of the map and sniping. But I think there are better pieces of equipment and better ways to play the tank. Filling the tanks with CO2 is a complete waste of time. Improving the suspension, complete waste of time. Enhanced gun laying drive plus 10% aim time is not terrible, but because vents kind of does the same thing, maybe not effectively, but as effectively, but it reduces your aim time, it reduces your reload. Yeah, I don't think there's reason to put the gun laying drive on this tank. Your aim time of 2.3 matches your reload time of about 6 seconds quite well. So I don't think this is a very good choice to put on the tank. But again, you may differ. You may decide to put it on because you're having problems with the aim time, but even improving the aim time is not going to help your accuracy, so I don't think it's viable. Coated optics. Yeah, once again, if you're playing this aggressively, the view range of 370 meters is very, very good on this tank. If you put coated optics and play it as a heavy tank all the time, then yes, then coated optics are perfectly viable. It will get you up to around 410 meters of view range, so, with with crew skills and everything else. So yeah, it's not terrible if you're playing it as a heavy tank all the time, but the issue with the T28 heavy tank concept is sometimes you do actually have to play it as a TD because you're just not quick enough to keep up with the heavies, or maybe no one goes the heavy line and you can't go alone. Sometimes you are going to have to play a little bit more passively, especially in a tier 8, tier 9 game where a lot of tier 9s, a lot of tier 8s. Maybe you play it more as a TD, but Coded Optics, it's viable. Again, it depends on how you play the tank, but for those situations, what I've gone for is Binox over the Coded Optics, because there are situations when you do have to play it like a TD. There are situations where you play it like a heavy tank, and if you're playing it like a heavy tank in town shooting things at close range, you don't need Coded Optics or Binox. So you know, they make absolutely no difference. And if I'm playing it as a TD, I'd rather have Binox than Coded Optics. If I'm playing it as a heavy tank, it's usually because I'm in a city map or playing on a map where the view range really doesn't matter. There's choke points and everything else, at which point, yeah, I think I'd rather have Binox over Coded Optics. I just find it a little bit more flexible, but again, that's just me. The camo rating on the tank isn't very good in the first place, so unlike most TDs where maybe you might use Binox and Camo Net, I don't think either of these are, well, I don't think the Camo Net's viable. Binox are there as an emergency measure, but anyway, the choice is up to you. As I say, that's just how I play the tank. If I'm playing it aggressively in town, I don't need vision, so both of these options are, you know, could be replaced with something else, but there are occasions where I've got to spot my own targets and shoot from distance, so I went for the Binox rather than playing it as an out-and-out heavy. So yeah, I think the equipment choices, as I say, are completely up to you. That's just my decisions. I went for the gun rammer because it improves my DPM. I went for the vents because it improves my tank all round. It improves my view range, reload, aim time, you know, traverse speed. It improves everything, and the traverse speed really needs improving on this tank. And then I've gone for Binox for those occasions where I'm sort of split between playing as a TD or playing as a heavy. As I say, if I'm in town, I don't need view range at all, and if I'm out in a big open map, maybe I need to spot my own targets. So anyway, they're the equipment choices. Let's move on to crew. And as you can see here, we've got a pretty big crew. There are 5 crew members. We've got a commander, a gunner, a driver, and 2 loaders. So no radio operator in this tank. So yeah, decent crew, but how does it match up to the rest of the tanks in the tech tree? Now, unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, there are a lot of TDs for the Americans, and the crew layout for the T28 heavy tank concept does not match very many of them. But the one nice thing about having the big crew is you can train up pretty much every crew. I mean, you've only got 2 crew members in the tier 2, T3, and then we move on to the T56, where you've got a pretty full crew, but we've got a radio operator, and there's no radio operator in the heavy tank concept, so you can train up 4 of the 5 crew members here. Then we come to the T40, which is a match, strangely enough, for the lower tiers, a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader. So if you're someone who likes derping around the T40, maybe using the howitzer, yeah, maybe you could train up a crew for the T40 or use your T40 crew in the heavy tank concept. But we also split and move to the M8A1, and we've only got 4 crew members, including a radio operator, so we're missing 2 loaders. So not a very good matchup. We can only train up 3 crew members. So we move on to tier 5, and I think these are roughly the same here: commander, gunner, driver, radio operator, and loader. So once again, radio operator but no loader, and it's the same for the Wolverine. So we're missing a loader and we need a radio operator, but we can train up 4 members. When it comes to the tier 6, we've got exactly the same issues. Yeah, 5 crew members, no radio operator, and we're missing a loader. So you're going to have a radio operator that's not getting a workout in your T28 heavy tank concept, so he's going to be training slower than the rest. When we get to tier 7, well, no, hang on, this tank, yeah, T25 AT has a smaller crew, so once again, we're missing a radio operator from the T25 too, but we aren't from the T25 AT, but we are missing the other loader. So yeah, it's kind of just the tanks on the American TD tech tree are just the crew layouts are so different. So we got 5 members in the prototype, and we've got 4 members in the T28. So yeah, that's kind of strange. So we're missing a loader, and we still have an extra radio operator in the T28 prototype, but when it comes to the T28, which is the tank this is a concept for, we're missing a loader. So once again, not a perfect crew trainer. And we move to tier 9, and we get to the T30 heavy tank. Look, it's an experimental heavy tank. It even says it here, guys. So the T30 heavy tank, and we've got almost. We've got the full crew in here in the T30, but we still need that radio operator. But if you've been going up the lines, going up the TDs before this, you should have a spare radio operator. So T30 is almost a perfect match. And then the T95, which is the same tank as the T28, which is the same tank, well, was the T28 heavy tank concept was based on, or was going to be based on. We've got the 4 crew members, so yeah, not perfect. We're still missing a loader. In fact, it's not, other than the T40 further down, it's not until you get to the tier 10s. We've got the T110, oh, gotta move my mic here. Yeah, T110E4 has a perfect crew layout for the T28 heavy tank concept, and the T110E3 has a perfect layout. So yeah, other than the T40 and the 2 tier 10s, it's not a perfect crew trainer. You're going to be missing out on crew training for a radio operator because there isn't one in most of the American TDs up the lines, or a lot of them. The majority of them use a radio operator, so you're not going to be able to use the radio operator, but you're not going to be able to use that radio operator in tier 10 anyway. The last tank that uses a radio operator is the T30. You're not going to be able to train a second loader except in the T40, and until you get to tier 9 on the T30, or tier 10 on the E4 or the E3. So yeah, it's not a perfect crew trainer. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I try and show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. I am platooned with Beyond D. We are here on Siegfried Line, which is, you know, ironic because this is the very line that this tank was designed to penetrate when it was originally in concept stage. But yeah, we're here on Siegfried Line. I'm platooned with Leon D, and I'm not top tier. I'm mid tier. I'm a tier 7 in a tier 8 game. There are 5 tier 8s on either side, a bunch of tier 7s, and a few unhappy tier 6s, and yeah, even a tier 5. But yeah, this is a slightly older replay because it's before the latest matchmaking changes, but that's how long I've been meaning to do this review. So we're moving up, and we're going to be playing in town. So first of all, we're going to look at the strengths. You can see the acceleration is there. We can accelerate up to 29 kilometers an hour quite quickly. Going uphill, it's okay. It is okay. You don't lose too much speed going uphill. So the power to weight ratio is alright, and we're just going to advance. Now, even though there is RT in play, quite a lot of RT on either side, it doesn't matter because now I'm in town and we can move up. Thought I might have had a shot on the Emil. Is he going to get away? He's going to get away. We don't manage to shot. You can see the amazing 30 degrees of gun traverse here. I do get spotted. Okay, there's a Cromwell. Now again, staying angled, and look at this, bounces. This Cromwell's going to have severe problems going through the front of this tank. So he's tracked, put one shot in. We don't have an easy shot on his tracks. We can't keep him in place, but yeah, reload not quite good enough. Can we get another one? No, we hit the wall. So not much to shoot at here, but he is bouncing. He's going to have severe problems penetrating me, but we can get another shot in, another 376, which is a nice high roll for this gun. And we're at angled. Is he coming back? Is he going to come back for more? No, a hint of a shot. And someone is nudging me here. Someone's beside me. Cromwell going to come back? Not really, but we're staying RT safe. Put a shot in anyway, and Beyond D is in his heavy tank concept. So he advances, gets shot by RT. We advance. Look at this gun traverse. I'm at an angle. Come on, swing around. Just shot in the move. So this is very good at shooting on the move. Cromwell, again, staying slightly angled. He doesn't know where to shoot me. He's firing HE now, but we take him out for kill number 2, and we're just continuing to advance. So RT's not going to have an easy time aiming at me. I'm in town. I'm looking at the Jagdpanther, but I figure we've got enough tanks there who can deal with him. And look, there's an M6. And the M6 is the tank that this tank is based on. So M6, go for his weak spot, 310 damage. Again, no premium ammo needed. He tracks me for 0 damage, but yeah, okay, Leo around the corner. And these are tanks I can easily deal with. Checking behind me, there we go, Leo bounces. Swing around, put a shot into him, track him. Oh, SU-100 on the hill, Beyond D is taken care of. So we're bouncing. Kill the Leo. And yeah, Sturzwagen 74, SU-100. Oh, he's poking. Beyond puts one shot in. and we just got penned. We just got penned in the cupola, or in the sponson by the M6, who then dies. So we're just advancing, and you can see that the speed, maneuverability, not great. I mean, you can reach your top speed, but trying to turn this tank is hell. But Stridsvagen comes up, he pokes, shot in the move, and as I say, this tank is just so good at shooting on the move, because you're not moving so quickly, you don't have a high top speed. SU-100, again, angled, my tracks eat the shot, because the side armor, very, very underrated on this tank. It's got very, very good side armor, spaced armor, and tracks, and 101mm of side armor you need to go through. So there we go. You can see that turning the tank, it turns like a brick. It's very, very hard to turn, but that gun traverse makes up for it. So we're on 4 kills, 2,000 damage. I've done 2,370 damage blocked with armor. Not a lot of assistance damage, but again, going uphill, we're doing about 15 kilometers an hour, so that's okay. Still RT in play, so we're just advancing. And now we're going to see the weak part. So we've seen everything good, but now we're going to see the weak part. So first of all, FE206, he gets taken out, but you can see how the shell looped there.
Ready to fire.
Okay, ready to fire. Beyond leaves him on just 35 health, but boom. Aim time is okay. We take him out third person, get spotted, but still an RT in play. 5 kills. And we're going to advance. Now, as I say, you've seen what's good about the tank. The armor, the gun traverse, hiding your weak spots, but now you're going to see me playing maybe as if I was a TD, because the next shots I'm going to be firing are at distance, and you're going to see the accuracy isn't there. The penetration at distance isn't there. So T34-3, and you see how high that shot went? That shot went nowhere near the center of the reticule, so fully aimed. Look at this, watch this, watch this. And look how high the shot went. I mean, these are fully aimed shots. And first 2 shots go high, and then we get him on the third shot. So that was 3,000 credits fired to do 224 damage. 3,000 credits to do 224 damage. And that's the downside of this tank. So just 1 tank left on the enemy team. It's the M44, and we're advancing, and not quickly. So someone else may have to spot this guy for me, but we picked up 6 kills. Advancing, and this is why this tank is not a good TD. You don't have the accuracy, and you don't have the penetration at distance. So we're advancing, trying to track down this M44 before he gets away. There he is. So swing around, and sit and aim. Look at the aim time, it's not terrible. And there we go, kill number 7. So yeah, heavy tank concept. So a slightly more impressive game where I'm not bullying tier 5s and tier 6s, but yeah, it was a fairly even matchup for the heavy tank concept, and we were able to get into town, stay RT safe, angle, bounce, and pick up quite a lot of kills. So we finished with the ace, we finished with cool-headed to survive 10 ricochets, which you'll do a lot in this tank. You picked up steel wall, which again you can expect a lot of in this tank, and we picked up our top guns. So we finished top on XP with 1314, and you can see that beyond he finished reasonably high as well, 2,000 damage for him and his T28 concept as well. So I mean, the 2 tier 7s, we weren't top tier, but we both finished top on damage, top on XP, and we drove into town and just advanced together, played like heavy tanks, used our angles, kept our weak spots hidden, and you know, it works, and I think this is the best way to play the tank. When we come down to the shots fired, you could see that the shots I missed at the very, very end were shots I missed because I was sniping, because I was playing and shooting at distance. You know, all my shots up till then were at short range, where you don't have to worry about the accuracy, you don't have to worry about your aim time. Short range, the gun is very, very good, and our shots that were missed, other than one, which I took a blind shot on a Cromwell earlier on, or Comet, yeah, basically all our shots hit at close range. We bounced a couple, unfortunately, but yeah, it's only when you snipe with this gun that you lose credits. You have to hit and do damage to earn credits. It's expensive to fire this gun, and unfortunately, when you miss shots, you're going to not make as much money. So we fired 18, hit 14, and as I say, the ones we missed were at distance. So you could see that my damage was all done at close range, because I think that's where this tank excels, at close range, and damage done at distance of more than 300 meters, only 300 397, and the only shots we missed, most of them were at long range as well. So we received 13 hits, and we again managed to bounce 12. We were only penned once when I was focused on the Leo and gave the M6 an easy shot at my turret, but I couldn't keep my sponsons hidden against both those tanks, so I kept it hidden against the Leo. M6 penned me, but you know, the armor is there even against higher tier tanks. So we blocked another 2,370 damage with our armor. We spotted 2, damaged 9, destroyed 7, did 865 assistance damage, and traveled a whole distance of 1.71 kilometers. Now, money-wise, it's not great. Again, 42,000 earned. We only came out with 32,700, which, you know, is significantly less than you would with a premium tank, because it's a reward tank, not a premium tank. You don't get a credit bonus, and as you can see, ammo came to exactly 18,000, and we paid 18 or fired 18 times. So it's definitely, if you're having bad games on this tank, you could even end up losing money. It depends on whether or not you're running consumables, but as you can see, decent damage, decent result, and decent XP. So, you know, you got to see what the tank at its best when it's in town, but you also got to see it at its worst when it has to hit tanks at distance. And I think that sums up the T28 concept. It really, really hurts me when I see players sitting at the back of the map and sniping because it's a TD, because Wargaming said it's a TD. It's not. It's there in the name, guys. T28 heavy tank concept. Okay, folks, time to sum up. If the T28 heavy tank concept is a tank you have not yet unlocked from personal missions, maybe you should have another go. Maybe you should try and unlock it. Maybe you gave up on missions, or maybe you didn't have a good range of tanks to try and do missions in. Maybe you're a more experienced player now than when the missions first came out. Maybe you should try and give the missions another go with better crews, better equipment, and a better range of tanks to choose from. Maybe you did unlock it already and don't play it very much because you didn't like it. Maybe the gun handling was annoying, and because it was slow and sluggish, maybe you didn't enjoy playing it as a TD. But I think maybe that's one of the reasons people don't like the tank. It's because they try to play it as a TD, and it's not a very good TD. Play it as a heavy tank, and I think you're going to have a lot more fun in it. But there are lots of reasons maybe to revisit or try and unlock the T28 heavy tank concept again. So we'll start with the positives. First major positive has to be the armor. The armor is incredibly good for a tier 7. Yes, people are going to switch to premium ammunition. Yes, there are lots of weak spots, but there's nothing you can do about that. You can hide your weak spots, but the premium ammunition, they're going to fire it at any heavily armored tank. It doesn't matter whether or not you're a TD or a heavy tank. So the armor is pretty good, exceptionally good, and the side armor is surprisingly good because, as I say, not a lot of people realize that this is 50 millimeters of spaced armor with 20 millimeters of track armor and then 100 millimeters of body armor behind that. So you can bounce a lot more than you give this tank credit for. So the armor is very, very good. Another big positive for the tank is the fact that gun traverse is 30 degrees to either side, which means you practically have a turret. You can drive around corners at an angle, get your gun on target, hide your weak spots, and still shoot tanks. I think it takes takes a lot of players by surprise. So the gun traverse is a big, big positive. The acceleration, even though the ground traverse figures for this tank, the hidden traverse ground resistance figures are terrible, the acceleration is still pretty good. I mean, the acceleration and top speed aren't great for a TD, but when you consider it as a heavy tank, or view it as a heavy tank, then the acceleration, power to weight ratio, and top speed aren't too bad. They're actually pretty good. The view range is another strength of the tank at 370. Again, very, very good for a TD, average for a heavy tank, but the view range means that this is a tank that can spot its own targets as long as you go for some sort of optics and have a decent crew in the tank. And it's it's not a terrible crew trainer. You could train up most crews in it. You are going to be missing a radio operator, you are going to miss a loader, but because the crew layouts on American TDs are so diverse, and because there are so many American TDs, it's very, very hard to get a good crew trainer. I mean, even the Scorpion is not a good crew trainer because it's only got 4 crew members, so once again, you're going to be missing a radio operator in this tank as well, and considering that there are only 2 premium TDs that you can play American TD crews in, neither of them cover the radio operator, neither of them have 2 loaders, so I think it is, or this one has 2 loaders, motors. The other one, the Scorpion, doesn't. But I think it's a, you know, it's as good a crew trainer as it can be. And if you've already got the tier 10 on the American TDs, then it's a perfect crew trainer for the tier 10. So, you know, it's a decent. It's not a perfect crew trainer, but it's not terrible. It's decent enough. So it's got quite a few strengths. It does have weaknesses. I think the biggest weakness, or the thing that annoyed me most about this tank, is the 4 degrees of gun depression, which is incredibly poor. It means that when you're trying to use this on hills or trying to use it on rises, it means that it's very, very difficult to get your gun on target. The traverse speed is absolutely awful, but then again, you know, putting it into context, it's awful traverse speed for a TD, but the traverse speed for a heavy tank isn't that bad. I mean, it's not good for a heavy tank, but, you know, there are heavy tanks out there that are just as bad. So the traverse speed means that players can get to your side and rear very, very easily. You can get flanked to this tank very, very easily, and when you do, there's very, very little you can do about it. Lots of weak spots on the tank. Another weakness for the tank, obviously the sponsons are weak. You've got to do your best to try and keep those hidden, but as I say, a lot of people don't realize that the viewports on top are also weak spots, so very, very easy to pin. The armor, very weak on top, so very, very susceptible to RT damage, and the rear of the tank can be pinned by most tanks firing HE. So yeah, the armor can be very good from the front, but terrible from the side and rear. The tank doesn't get special matchmaking, but it's a reward tank, which is another negative. It's not a premium tank, it's a reward tank, so not only does it not get special matchmaking, you don't earn any extra credits when you play it. You can train up crews like you would in a premium tank, but unfortunately you don't make the same credits in this as you would in a premium tank. So the Scorpion, if you're wanting to make credits, then I think the Scorpion is a far, far better bet. But if you simply just want to train crew members, then the T28 heavy tank concept is perhaps a little bit better. So yeah, I think it's got a lot of weaknesses, but it's also got a lot of strengths, and I think the biggest mistake people make in this tank is the fact that they play it as a TD, which means that the poor accuracy, which I forgot to mention as a weakness, the accuracy is poor, the penetration is quite poor for a tier 7 at 181. If you're sniping at distance, the penetration is going to go against you, the accuracy of 0.4 is going to go against you, and the shell velocity isn't very good on it either, which means again you're going to be missing shots at moving targets. So yeah, it does have a lot of weaknesses, but I think most of those weaknesses are because when you play it as a TD, the weaknesses become much more obvious. When you play it as a heavy tank, then you're shooting people in the face, you're playing it in cities, you're playing it using obstacles, playing it on the front line, then the accuracy doesn't matter, the aim time doesn't matter, the shell velocity doesn't matter as much, the penetration doesn't drop off as much, and I think a lot of the weaknesses of this tank are negated by playing it aggressively, playing it as a heavy tank. So yeah, it's a heavy tank concept, and I think that's the way it should be played, but that's just me. So yeah, if it comes down to whether or not you haven't completed the missions to unlock this yet, maybe go and give them another go. You know, a lot of people I know gave up on missions very, very early on after they were released, and you know, that was quite some time ago. Maybe you're a far more experienced player now. Now I know a lot of people may have unlocked this and then played a few games in it and then just didn't like it. You know, hop into it, give it another go, play it as a heavy tank and see how you do. Because I do think it's a pretty good tank for its tier. For a tier 7, I think it's an exceptionally good heavy tank. Maybe not quite a good tier 7 TD, but as I say, when it comes to crew training, there's not a lot of choices when it comes to the Americans. But yeah, I like this. I do think it's slightly OP when played aggressively. When you get the right map and the right matchup, I think this tank can be absolutely awesome. Press the battle button and really, really hope it's a city map first, and then secondly, hope that you're top tier or at least mid tier, because then you know that all the ingredients are in place for you to have a very, very good game. So overall, even though this is a tank that seems to have mixed reception, a lot of people like it, a lot of people don't like it. I'm in the field of liking it. I think it's a very, very good tank, and I think it's the best reward tank I've played so far. I think this is better than the Stug 4, and I think it's better than the T58A, which I haven't covered on the channel yet and I've unlocked, but this is the best of them so far. So yeah, is it worth it? Yeah, I think it's worth dusting off those missions and trying for it again, or maybe dusting off the tank if you haven't played it in a while. Hop into it and see how you feel. I think it is worth it. I like the T28 heavy tank concept, and I'm glad it's in the game. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.